Hold on, I'm checking to see if it really went on. I'm always perplexed to figure out where it went live, but yeah, it says we're talking, and then later I'll try and figure out so that we can answer here as well. So Kevin and Imran, thank you so much for joining me today. I am so interested to hear more. I didn't travel in the Pakistani side of things, but back in 1978, I went to Ladakh, and I went, I hitched a ride on a truck up the road, and it was at the time, the road was a one-way road, meaning that it was like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you could go up, and then Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday, you could come down. The road was that narrow. I mean, it was really, kind of one of those insane mountain roads. And I remember I flashed on what you guys said about the apricots, because that road was so, the altitude was so high, and it was like there were spirals of the mountain where the wind had just carved it all up. It looked like something from some science fiction film, which I imagine is where some people got their inspiration. And then suddenly out of the blue, there would be green. And you would stop there because that's where the chai house or whatever was, probably also to get gas. And they sold the most delicious apricots on the planet. So I was wanting to hear from you guys what it was like to arrive in that area, because I know you had to go overland and enjoy some of those wild mountain roads.
Yeah, it was so that's we took the famed Korakorum highway from the capital city of Pakistan up to this region. It's a region I've actually been to once before, about 10 years prior, but I flew. I hadn't had the experience of what Kevin and I shared, which is a really cool experience to go from. Islamabad is already kind of like about the foothills of the Himalayas, but basically that whole drive, the landscape and the elevation just gets more and more dramatic. Like it's kind of like you start looking and you're like, wow, like this is crazy. And then a little bit further on, you're like, oh man, that was nothing. Like this is even crazier. And eventually after a few times of that happening, you're like, how much crazier
in terms of like the how things are changing with altitude, or just it's looking like a different country successively as you go farther north?
Just in terms of like, it's dramatic. Like everything seems a little bit steeper, a little bit higher, a little bit narrower, a little bit more like,
No, you think it's extreme. You think it's extreme when you begin. And I mean, I live in the hills in Humboldt, right? So we're always on the edge of some precipice looking to fall off the side of the mountain. So in my mind, I'm like, hey, this can't be that much different in terms of feel, but it's radically different in terms of verticality. And so the further you head in on this quest, the greater this incline becomes, and the smaller you become. You start to become minuscule because it's so overwhelmingly big. And it's so odd to see the color change, the kaleidoscope of colors in the rock formations from this, because it's all relatively new. We're in like the 30 million year range, which is funny, because we call that new in terms of Earth geology, but it's all new. So it's aggressive and rugged and still, and you could see all the different formations from the uprising and all the color changes. And as we passed through, you would see these color changes, and it kind of marked your path. And it was something that I had never experienced. I've never seen raw mountains at such a distance of travel that were exposing their insides. You just got to see the interior of the mountains exposed. And when we got to one place, it was absolutely pure white, where it was all the marble area. And so it was entire mountains made of nothing but marble. and I had never seen a marble mining operation before. And so I didn't really understand that the whole mountain was marble. it was, I just felt so undereducated. Like, you know, I mean, I'm a North American.
It's such an amazing trip to do that kind of thing where you go from one part of the country to the other. I know one time I did all of India in like a 4-day train ride from the very south to the very north. And, you know, like you're saying, as you go, you start out, you're kind of in the plains and there's a certain kind of food and you go up and up and up and things change so dramatically. And it's such a wonderful experience. But put it into perspective for us where this kind of hash making production area that you were going to, you know, your actual destination. Because I was reading about it this morning to remind myself a little bit. I never went to Pakistan. Frenchie did. I stayed more on the Indian side of things, but in one of the articles, they were talking about how this area, there was never any invaders that got to that area. It was too hard to get to. And the first English person to get there was like in 1879 or something. You know, it's been very well, they talk about it's, you know, so well hidden because of the difficulty of getting to the area.
Yeah, the geography of that area has always presented like a significant challenge to anyone seeking to kind of go, say, between like Central Asia and the Indian subcontinent. You've literally got a wall of mountains, and that's why like a lot of early exploration was based around trying to find a way through or over the mountains, which
Khyber Pass, which was a bad news for everybody who ever tried it historically.
Like, you know, aside from the geography, you've got the weather, maybe like potentially unfriendly locals depending on the circumstances.
So what part are you guys actually in this? Because I pulled up a map for everybody. If you have access to Facebook on the Lost Art group, I put a couple of maps in there for you today to so that you could reference yourself to the area. When we talk about that Tihar Valley, you know, there's the side that is towards Afghanistan, and then there's a couple of areas. The one that they call the Khyber Agency, the Arakazai Agency, and then the Qumran Agency.
I'm gonna, if I read it, I'll be able to know. But I just wanted, there was something I wanted to say. So
yeah,
that area, like we're still talking fairly high up, but we kind of went to kind of two distinctly different areas. So one area we went to is the province known as Gilgit-Baltistan. That's where we went initially. And then where Tira is, that's in an area called, the province is called Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. It was formerly known as the federally administered tribal areas. And Tira is a little bit lower down than GB. It's still like relatively high altitude, but it's a little bit lower down.
So the name of the area where you guys did this recent trip was what again? Sorry.
So there's kind of like two main areas. One is the province of Gilgit-Baltistan. That sits like, that borders right up against the area that you were in. So like Indian held Kashmir, China, and Afghanistan. And then Khyber Pakhtunkhwa kind of just more sits right against Afghanistan.
Okay,
it's a little bit more, it's a little more west.
The map that I had was showing, yes.
We almost covered, I think, probably, I don't know, 1,000 miles total travel.
A lot.
So we didn't really go to like one place in particular. What we really were doing was recreating that Silk Route journey. And along the Silk Route, we experienced all the regions as we went through. And the reality of it is that it's just like Afghanistan, all regions produce. It's just that Tira is known as a hash producing region because it's the only place that really has an ability to kind of seal off the government to some degree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what they called it, the hidden area. And I guess to this day, the government is like, okay, we're not going to bother you.
Yeah, but they have their own political issues because of the proximity to Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that you have the Taliban trying to figure out, you know, their position. And so for us, when we went through, we did really all our collection. Now we got to, when we arrived in Pakistan, we had individuals from the Tira area meet us and bring with us product they had collected and gathered so we could experience the product. But when we went through the regions, everywhere we went, we met people who were hash makers who showed up with hash to smoke and hang out with us.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was fascinating just to see that. It was almost like being in California, where you go to Mendocino and you're bumping into people growing, and you go to Santa Cruz and you go down to Southern California.
Yeah.
So you got to experience the culture everywhere you went. And the political climate in Tira was aggressive. And so of the 20 of us, 19 of us chose not to go and do that experience because of the potential issue for the locals. So it wasn't so much that, you know, your life's in jeopardy. It's just that when you are in an area that has political issues, to me, the last thing you want to do is create issues for the people who live there.
You know, of course.
And there's no way around that one. Your presence creates problems.
Yeah.
I would as soon not be present. And I'm somebody like who's historically bold on shit, man. My whole life was all out kind of living. But when you get into like leadership roles, you understand that bravery is great, but common sense and respect for other people's safety is really most important. And so we didn't make the trip into Tira. And what we were able to do was we were able to travel the region with people from Tira and hash makers from Tira. So we had people that had been, you know, raised in the culture of hash for 1,800 years. Their tribes had lived in these valleys. And when we were talking to Saeed, you know, I asked him, I said, when did you begin, you know, your hash making career? And he looked at me and he goes, my first memories of when I was a boy at 3 was working alongside my dad making hash. And he had a 4-acre parcel that he hand sifted. And so having Saeed with us was just wonderful, because you had somebody that had, you know, immersed. I'm kind of like Frenchie, where like when you hung with Frenchie spent his whole life in the sift. And so his perspective was different. He you know, when he held the resin in his hands and you talked to him, there's a different realness to it. You know, from all of us that live our lives in an industry, when we're in our respective places, you can't deny that we spend our whole life touching it. And because of it, there's a comfort.
Yeah.
There's a comfort. And so to be with Saeed was incredible, because I was just watching him move the hash in his fingers, and the way he was rolling it, like it was just these little details. The way they made the cigarettes, there was just it had been done 10,000 times. Yeah, the way it moved in the hand and the way he presented it and the fluidity of it and the comfort of it. And so it was just really a gift to have him present. And he rolled with us on the trip, and his brother did too. And his brother wasn't a hash maker. His brother ran the tea house. So his brother, he goes, I'm a tea man. And I thought it was hysterical, right? The kid was precious too, man. He couldn't have been a nicer young man. And they had, you know, the hash field, and then he had a small tea house for visitors and guests. And so the two brothers kind of split in terms of what they handled with the family business. And to have both of them present was just phenomenal. But man, I tripped out, because every single place we went, we would bump into locals that were being introduced to us. And without fail, every single one of them had hash with them that they had made themselves from their own crop in the area. And that was the thing that really struck me most, was that, you know, like we understand the story of cannabis because we study it, but I just really didn't quite catch the integrated nature of cannabis with people until I was there, where the plant is used in every aspect. The seed is gathered for food sources in the winter. They collect the resin not just for inspirational usage, but for also medicinal usage to make teas. The raw products get fed to the animals. The rest of the material goes back on the soil for your regenerative return. And so you were getting to see regenerative agriculture at its finest and complete usage of the plant, where there was nothing that the plant produced that wasn't used. And every farm had a small crop of cannabis. And small, we're talking, like 1/16 of an acre. So, but every single farm we went by had a full-on crop going. And for me and Imran, it was fascinating because we were able to see the crops that were being grown in conjunction with the cannabis. And we started noticing profiles that were similar in similar crops. So if it was a potato field, or it was where they had walnuts, or they were growing other crops, you could start to notice commonalities in the base population of profiles, and then within those outliers. And so for Imran and I, man, we were just running through the fields like little kids. And then we would yell out loud, "Hey, we found something." And everyone would run to the voice, and you'd have to run through the field to find the voice. And then we'd all take a look. But it was such an education on the usefulness of cannabis in its totality. And I don't think that's what I didn't expect that I'm Western. And so, we have a very different view of how we perceive the drug, and we don't see it in its totality at all. We separate it completely. And to see that integrated approach to cannabis, and the integrated approach to how all the regions share product. So no one hoards genes. There is no, this is our genes, this is what we use. It was constantly an evolution and a development of what's best, what works best, what gives us greatest diversity. How do we benefit as a community? So it was fascinating to see, this historical context to cannabis, and then how when we took it to the West, because of illegalities, we kind of perverted it. And now we're trying to go back to the norm of how do you use this plant in this, cohesive, complicated way. But they made it so simple that you could easily understand it.
I think that's the frustration for somebody like me who lived in Asia for such a long period of time, and never coming back to the West for, 15, 18 years. And staying in places like you're saying, like when you're in the mountains in India, you have the old women who are smoking it as they're carrying, big bags of sticks for fires and whatnot up the mountain. And, you're 40 years younger than that person, and you can hardly keep up with them. And it is such an integration to their life in terms of their health. And then to come back to the West and have to, put your paranoia mode back on, and your protective mindset about nobody can know what we're doing. Nobody can know what we have. You have to protect your family and your children against too much knowledge, because the teachers are trying to figure out if maybe they should bust you and take your kids away. And I mean, it's insane. When this plant is among probably the more safe medicinal things that anybody could possibly take. You can overdose on practically every herb if you consume too much of it. With cannabis, it's just going to put somebody to sleep for a long time. It's
totally. That's what Ethan Russo said. Ethan Russo had that statement that cannabis is to him the drug with the greatest impact with the least negative impact.
I mean, I've seen it multiple times. Well, my dog's overconsumed multiple times and has been in a coma for 36 hours. And then, you look at them and there's some concern, they're not moving at all. And then it'll be like that. The person will, the amount of THC or cannabinoids will lower to the point where they are conscious again, and they'll just be awake. It's so amazing.
There was something I was going to say, just regarding, like, we were talking a little bit about like how we treat it over here in the West. Interestingly, although like cannabis is fairly prevalent in Pakistan, it's still like recreationally illegal over there. So all the crops that we did go
thanks
into,
to us.
No, yeah, for sure. And that's actually, I believe, tied to the U.S. drug war. Like they actually tied that to aid back
Oh,
in
absolutely.
one.
We did it all over the world.
Mhm.
But actually, like nowadays, the areas where you'll see cultivation tend to be more remote places because if they're kind of too connected, that's when enforcement can and
Yeah.
has like stopped people. So actually, like almost the degree of openness kind of correlates with the remoteness of the area or the inaccessibility or the the ability, like in the case of Tira, the ability for the government to actually
Yeah,
do
no,
anything.
it's not without risk for sure. You can still get busted in India or Pakistan, and
Yeah,
it would be
definitely,
total
definitely.
misery there as well, for sure.
So yeah, so like in the sense that you kind of do have to be a little careful who you talk with it about, like if you're just meeting average people, especially as you come down towards the more populated south. And
Yeah.
that's something that like as I talked to like people that I was meeting down there, like kind of why I was there and what we were doing, a lot of them were like, don't say this to everyone. I'm like, it's okay, I understand, I've only mentioned it to you because I know you a little bit now, but
Yeah.
I'm not just going out there and like waving flags and saying, hey, we're here to do this, you know.
So
And it's ironic because there's so much cannabis growing. Like, remember when we were in Islamabad?
Yes,
They
that
take
is,
us to show us some wild feral crops.
yeah.
And I'm looking at some plants and I'm like, whoa, these are all pollinated. There must be a male. And he nudges me and I turn to the left. And this is going, I mean, it's a field and it's all natural. And everywhere we found a depression, anywhere where water could hold and collect,
Yeah.
you saw cannabis growing. It's in such a, because it's natural. That's where cannabis, found a home. And so it's so odd to see something that is so prevalent, but still influenced by the American drug war.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now that we find money in it, now we're trying to figure out how to undo what we did. But God, we wreaked havoc throughout the world. There's no question.
It's so much.
That's definitely like, that's an important point, right? Like, and something to take note of and to be careful about. You know, it's to think that like some years ago, American foreign policy influenced laws which criminalize cannabis in this other countries, such that the stigma exists heavily there today. And now I'm not saying we, but there will be people who kind of want to exploit Pakistani cannabis for their own purposes that come from America. And now we want to take that, and after we've kind of pushed you out to the fringes, now we want to exploit it and make money off it. It's kind of
it wouldn't be the first time. Look what we did in these areas, not that area per se, because it's a more remote, less remote. Look what we've done to their land races, our better genetics,
Yeah.
That's what's fortunate about here, though, Kim, was that was the beauty of being in Pakistan. Because, like, I mean, I've been to enough places in the world where I saw the infiltration.
Yeah.
Pakistan, because of that 20-year hiatus from 9/11 forward, really nobody went out.
Yeah.
It actually was the best thing possible for their gene pool.
Right.
Because what it did is it kept the Europeans and the Americans out of their world. And it allowed there now to be, the idea that you're touching plants that have this unbelievable heritage of survivability. That's what was so amazing to see, because once you start to understand that the seed was the primary desire of cannabis, right? The seed, this food source, and it was carrying the seed across the Silk Route that spread cannabis all over these regions.
Yes.
And you're like, whoa, it's this food source. And you start to think, well, if I was growing food, then I would do like all humans. I would breed and develop for larger germplasm, so I'd have more energy within the seed. But that's not what we saw. What we saw was common sense. Mm-hmm. That they realized that survivability is first and foremost, and that smaller seeds, bigger seeds are all seeds, and that the gene pool has to be in this broad display of of many traits, many things, so that no matter what happens, early season, late season, catastrophe of pest and pestilence, you're going to have food.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating because I had never been in a place where literally you have 4 months of, when the snow falls in those mountains, you have 4 months of zero access.
Yeah.
And the people that we met are sending me photos now online so I can see what the region looks like. And I'm like, whoa, Siberia, like it is barren and you're not getting through. And so if you don't have the food to make that 4-month journey, you're going to starve to death. And the ability for the people to understand how to still, even today with other food sources, other access, the way they still treat cannabis is in this big population, and they use the males as the drivers. So all the females remain in the crop, but they come through and they cull the males and they leave males to do the pollination, and they're using the male characteristics to steer their desires, but they make sure that the male characteristics are varied. So always good frames, good resin, good odors, strong, healthy, vigorous, resistant plants, but very different in morphological and production traits. So it was just killer because I saw the smallest seeds I think I've ever seen on anything from a broadleaf. Remember that? Imran, they were the size of like tiny grain, and I mean under a loop, perfectly developed. And then some of them the size of like, really a small pea.
Yeah.
And I had never seen such a diversity in seed, and it was just so real because it's centuries, millennia of practices being applied, saying, listen, monoculture is deadly in every aspect. And therefore you have survivability.
To do that was so impressive to Frenchie. We had these populations that had been working with the plant forever. They literally could hardly see the trichome heads and much less have a name for what that was, but they had an intuitive understanding of working with the plant that was just so phenomenal. So it must be so interesting now. For example, I saw you guys had photos of people who are doing this, I think they call it majma, static tech tray process using, so let's backstep a little bit. Did you see anybody doing the traditional sieving process while you were there?
We didn't get to go to the hash, there's kind of two main regions we went to. One was Hoper Valley, which is, as Kevin was saying, was where they grow for seed. They really don't. If they do, we didn't see it. It's a place where they eat the seed. That's why they cultivate it. The other region that some of us visited was Dera. That's like the famed hash producing region. We have lots of we like you said, we met people who do this, like actual farmers and hash producers, and we have volumes of videos and photos, and we got a chance to speak to them about how they do it and things like that. But we didn't actually get to physically witness it. But there's another part to that, which is this is a two-part answer. There's another part to that, which is, typically speaking, their sifting process would happen after, like in the spring, like after, not quite when the milk has happened, but basically they would wait.
The winter's very important.
So we went in October, that's harvest time. It's not sifting time. However, and this is where the caveat comes in. This is kind of interesting. That majma process, which literally translates to the word trays, because those things kind of resemble trays, has allowed them to change the process a little bit, because they realize they can use static tech to actually clean up. And I could be wrong, but I believe the reason that they wait the course of the winter is so that sifting is easier. It's become dry. The trichomes have.
No, and that's the other thing that Frenchie, as a European who liked traditional hashish, in all producing countries, they expose the plant to a drying and curing in the sunshine, generally like out in the field or on the roof of the houses, for 2 to 3 months.
I asked why too. I asked them a question about that, about profile.
What did they say?
They said that when they do it different. Like we produce a product and then we age post-production. They do this 4-month hold. And what they're really trying to do is get rid of a lot of the gassy aroma. So Americans are addicted to gassy aromas. A gassy aroma is king. You add gas and a little bit of fruit, and you're talking the cannabis industry in the United States. Whereas, and I was really interested because I didn't see some of the profiles, and I asked them. I said, "Why are these profiles not here? And what is this reason?" And they said, "Oh, we don't like those profiles. They're too intoxicating. They're dangerous to consume when you live on the side of a mountain." And so we age it out and we let it off gas, and then we let it convert. And then what you found was hash that had far more of a floral fruit nuances that when you consumed it, and it was neat because we were consuming when we had 500 kilo, you had 500, grams of it to consume. So we probably had 5 different 100-gram balls of really primo, top quality dry sift that the farmers and the crew from Tierra brought with us to say, hey, this is ultra premium. And then it allowed us to, and because it was from different farms, different people, you could see subtleties, but they all had a very commonality of extreme pliability, beautiful gum, no plant matter. Like the sifting process on that first pass was primo.
Yeah.
And the reveal on it wasn't just that earthy, rich, what we would call traditional hash odor, the characteristic we know of hash, but there was fruits and florals that I had never smelled in any type of hash like that prior. And it was, they said that you can't get those to come out until you get the gas off the top. So it was, we prefer those profiles for flavor, and we don't like the super intoxicating effects of the petroleum direction because it makes it dangerous to live. And there was a day when we left the hotel in the morning at like, say, 6 o'clock, right? So I go outside. I'm in Pakistan. I'm like, I'm going to spend every waking hour doing something. So I went outside, and so 2 of the Pakistani guys, the photographer and Anand, one of our partners, were going to go explore this mountain. And so I go with them and we climb up the side of this mountain. And I mean, it's like a full struggle, right? We're all sweat soaked and just struggling. And all of a sudden you see these kids hopping down the mountain like little goats with their backpacks, and they're in school clothes with shoes on, and they're bouncing down the hill like a goat, and we're cracking up. And you realize that it's a mountain culture, that the farms on the ridges above, they come down and go back up. And so we are climbing up and down, and all of a sudden this old guy pops out, and he's got a kid on his shoulders, and he's doing it, and he laughs, and because they could communicate with the guys I'm with, and he's like, oh, he's only 3, so he's a little young. By 4 or 5, he'll be able to do this just fine. But it was this sense of awareness of your environment. And when I was there, I really started to understand better this idea of will of God, because like I used to work out in the ocean. So like when you work on the ocean, you're insignificant, but I hadn't experienced that in dry land environment. And when I was in those regions, I understood just how aggressive and brutal the area was, and you never really could go to sleep. Like mentally, you have to always maintain awareness that something can come down, something can kick out. There could be radical weather change. You could have, for millennia, aggressive, violent marauders coming down to attack. And so you start to understand the development and the nature of the drug, because the plant's the plant, but how they treat it and work with it and steer it is based off of the human need, right? Because we're not just grabbing the crop.
I was just going to say that the theory that you gave me before, and the work that you did at team at UCLA on how responded in environments all over the world, that the reason that we see such dramatic cultivar expression differences is in fact also related to the needs of the populations that are living there. When we talk about terroir, we often talk about, the plant is responding to the water, to the atmosphere, to the earth, and maybe to the treatment that the farmer is providing. but you were the first person that brought that equation for me into the picture, that the plant is actually responding to the needs of the human that are going to consume it, which was so mind-blowing for me to add that part to the equation.
Is this called coevolution? I think this is the term where, like,
I think so. We're all intertwined. And when I got to see that situation, because I'm always curious, is, you know, the idea of why do earthy profiles, why do they make us relaxed? But pretty clear, but just calm. And I was in the place where those things were really created, because we can say all those type of profiles come from these regions. And it was the first time I got to really experience the reality of, holy shit, you want to be high so that you're uplifted, and you want your body relaxed so that you can deal with the fact that you're at 10,000 feet walking up the side of a mountain. You know, it's like Colombia, you know what I mean? Like, the terrain is savage, and it let me understand the need for the clarity, you know, because, like, why do we like profiles? And in the US, I think that our world is so fast paced, and you're bombarded with so much media so continuously that you need to escape it through a narcotic. And so you go to this gaseous type heavy effect when you seek that separation.
Is it that, or is it, because one of the things that I get a lot of about traditional hash, I think the US, and to a degree large parts of Canada as well, it's like a big island that technically you're not smoking hash, you're smoking rosin. Most of the, you know, like, so many times people will come up to me and they'll be like, Madam Cannoli, I want to show you my hash. And so I'm like, okay, great, I'd love to see it. And then they extend a jar of something liquidy, and I'm like, that's not hashish. Sorry, I can't speak to that because I don't consume rosin. So I think that we have, again, going back to the success of the US war on drugs, we have a couple generations of culture, well, even before that, for whatever reason, kind of to your theory, Kevin, this was a place that saw flower, that didn't see the resin for the longest time. You know, traditionally here, we didn't have that culture. Concentrate.
No, we took the plants.
Flower.
We took the plants over, but we didn't take the culture over.
Yeah.
So America, US, builds its cannabis culture on Mexican and South American genetics, which are meant to be smoked.
Yeah.
And then when we go into the you know, that late 70s, or that you know, late 70s, when we first started really getting cannabis to come in that could be finished by October 1st and ran indoor, that's what we were left. Me and Marcus Richardson, the bubbleman. Me and Marcus Richardson were talking about it. And we were talking about the irony, because he and I are both older. We're old enough to remember when that hash plant era of the 80s and it was here, and how none of us were making hash with it. We would keep it over a silk screen, and you know, you grind some of it up.
A lot of it was being people were throwing their trims to their animals. He was astounded, and you could people.
Oh yeah, we used to take it from people.
Yeah,
it was free. It was a burden.
It was a burden.
When we first started messing around making hash, I had access to thousands of pounds of trim so we could figure out our process.
So, but just going back to that,
and there was no market.
That idea, I know there wasn't. We brought hash here one time and nobody would buy it. It was just so astounding in the 1980s. Going back to that,
even later on though, like
even
later on though, Kim. Remember, I had a dispensary that Frenchie and I used to do work.
Yep.
And the issue was that America wasn't ready for traditional hash because they had not experienced true traditional hash. It had been so many decades since hash made it over to America that what they got was all kinds of low-end amalgamations of plant material crammed together. And so he to me, he was the bridge of the past into the future, because he never once said, I'm going to change the direction because I believe the direction is correct. But it was that the introduction to consumption had to be through BHO. BHO created a dab rig culture, right? It's like there was already the bong and the smoking pieces through these people, but once it went into concentrate, it exploded. And so you create a culture of appreciation for glass art. right? I mean, this is like, it's $1 billion game. So this is definitely influential. The device became a relationship, just like the phone. And the point is that that's the thing with rosin, is that what they got used to was these products that burn clean and leave no residue, as if that is the final indicator of the high.
But
it's
going
just
back
that
to what you said before about, like, you know, how we're a speedy culture. I still think, and I challenge all of you, you haven't experienced, most of you, traditional hashish, because you like the speediness of the rosin. Frenchie used to say, you know, like for him, the big difference was in the afternoon when he didn't want to drink another coffee, he would take a hit of the rosin because it was bang, it was short, it was speedy. But that his big preference was traditional hashish. And I used to love the way he described it. He would say, it's like being enveloped in a snuggly blanket in front of a warm fire on a fluffy rug. You know, that there was all this kind of body comfort in it. Just
totally.
Like total, he called it overall well-beingness. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't smoke their rosin and enjoy the speediness, especially when you're young. I mean, you're talking to somebody who loved speedy when I was young. But I just feel like this traditional hash culture is still lacking here in the US. And well, I know this because when I go to any big city with Belle and we're like, oh, we need some hash or rosin or whatever for something that we're doing. Like we went to New York a few months back. We could not have found any traditional hashish if our life depended on it. We had,
but you're not looking in the right place, though. See,
no,
I believe the opposite. I believe the opposite, though. No. I believe, and I do, and the reason why is because I speak around the United States, and so when I go to any of these regions, who am I really talking to? But people who are craftswomen. I'm talking to operators, and what I've seen. I'm telling you, there's a 2 light, 4 light hash revolution in America today. And it's just that it really is the number of people who are producing premium hashish. And now some of them keep it as hash, and then some of them squish it so they can put it into device. But the bottom line is it has to be made as hash before it's put through the device. Right, so they're making.
Not ending up in the dispensaries. That's not.
No, it's not. It's not in dispensaries.
Feeds.
It's not.
In the dispensaries,
but it's in the culture.
Hashish is abominable in most cases. I mean,
no, but it's in the culture. And I know this. I've been doing this for too long. I saw the impact. Like we rode the BHO wave. We were the first white label in the region. Like we sold more of that product than anybody probably in Northern California. It was the change, but what we also understood was that this change in consumption would also begin to reemerge people who wanted the hash. But hash is, if you really look at it, just like you said, Frenchie's like a warm blanket. It's a body feel. And the issue in the States is that most people are disconnected from their bodies. Most individuals in the US are struggling with some kind of health issue. If you really look at the big picture, we wouldn't be considered a healthy population.
Yeah.
And because of it, you need mental escape. And so from someone who sells product through a store, right? I get store data, and for a long time, and then I like to look at patterns. It lets you understand, hey, that this product is emerging with younger people who were influenced by the online trainings of Frenchie and Marcus and Nicotee and all these other individuals, not Imran in his region. All these people had influence on others because they freely gave the secrets up. And then what it did is it inspired these people. So when I go to these events, I get to meet people who've never grown with a bottle. Everything they made to grow the herb was from a ferment. And then they took that 4 lights of herb and they made it into hash, and then they can show me the hash and they can show the rosin so they can have it in a device.
I mean, I hope that more and more people are experiencing that.
Oh, it's unreal. It's unreal. It's big.
To be saying that they're experiencing anxiety from smoking, so that they're actually secretly not smoking, which I mean is fine. I mean, I don't smoke, so
yeah. Well, we steered the direction to aggressive, and there's not enough choices for someone at the dispensary.
And that's what I want people just to understand. Yeah. That's also an option. that's a choice, because it serves Frenchie so well. You know, he used to always say that one of the biggest discoveries for him, even though he had lived in hash producing countries everywhere, was when he came to NorCal, understanding that all cannabis use is therapeutic. That even if you don't realize that you're experiencing cannabis therapy when you use it recreationally, that it is in most use structures bringing you some kind of therapeutic relief. So I just want people to understand that hashish is a different experience.
Yeah.
And that,
Can I jump in here for a second?
Absolutely.
I was going to comment on something, which is for me, being a generation below you guys,
or two.
Hash was always seen as a thing for old people. Like it was just an old people thing.
Yeah.
And what was really hot was high potency THC, in particular, like when the Kush wave hit, like, oh, we must smoke something that just absolutely zonks you out of your mind. And for a lot of older consumers getting hit by this wave, they were like, whoa, that's too strong for me. Like, I don't like that thing. What I'm calling it now is sort of like a hash renaissance, which is like a understanding that going too far in one direction and excluding like that which exists elsewhere, like hash, like cannabis that has more balanced cannabinoid profiles and things like that. I think that it's starting to sort itself out. It's not going to happen overnight, but we're definitely seeing like an appreciation for hash that wasn't there in like the 2010s, for example, or like the late 2000s. In Canada, our hash capital, I'll say, is generally thought of as Montreal. Montreal being a port city and having a lot of European influence and also a lot of Middle Eastern immigration, you have two groups of people who are quite familiar with hash. Europeans, obviously, because they're right across the Mediterranean from Morocco, Lebanon, these hash producing regions. And then also the fact that you have people coming from the Middle East where that's like hash is kind of what they're most familiar with. But I think it is spreading. I think there's, and I think part of it is actually what's happening with some of that traditional aged hash is you're actually getting chemical conversion to CBN. You're probably mellowing out the profile, you're changing the ratios of cannabinoids and probably terpenes too, that are dramatically impacting how a rosin, like a fresh pressed rosin, feels compared to like a several month aged hash, whether that's in cellophane or goat skin or something like that.
Did you guys did you see the goat skin hash?
We did. We had some with us. Yeah.
So I saw some in preparing for today's conversation. I was reading up on the area, and they talk about that a lot. They talk about the oils in the skin mixing with the hashish. I don't remember that being an element because we were exposed to the goat skin hash from refugees from Afghanistan when we were in India, because we couldn't go to Afghanistan. Almost as soon as we arrived in India, the Russians had invaded, and they were there the whole period of time that we were in Asia.
Right.
But I don't think you take it literally, though. I think that the implication is that you're taking hash inside of a living organism, right? That so it still is, just like herb isn't dead, it's still chemically active. That goat skin, because it's not tanned to death, still is releasing its volatile aromas and compounds. And so I think when we're talking about goat skin aged hash, it's the essence of the goat around the hash, not that it's this oil-soaked bag of goat grease. You're sticking the no, it can't be, because it would go rancid, right?
Yeah.
What we learned from the Pakistanis was that it was fascinating, because we were with a bunch of farmers, and they were explaining that the thing that we're really known for in the world of like farming is we're masters of preservation. We know how to keep butter good. And that was the example. We can hold butter for 45 years. And I laughed because I was like, why would you need to hold butter for 45 years? But I started to understand that the fat cache hidden was your food source and survivability through a winter. And so we started walking through the fields where they had created these holes in the ground lined with rock. And they would put all the food, all the things in there, and it would hold perfectly for seasons. Because the nutrient density was insane. So the natural value of every product was superior. So it had a complete array of, I would say, molecular compounds that really would fully developed for this purpose. And so when everything is steered towards these holding and storage methods, they're able to practice this whole art of aging and storing, just like their cob in Africa. And I've never had an African cob in Africa, so I don't know anything. I can't say a single word about what that would be like. But I assume it's the same deal where they've learned how to do fermentation in a way that holds cannabis in a form that they say is optimal for their consumption and for their usage. And so the goat skin stuff is just, it's fascinating, but it's a tool that they use to be able to hold a product so they could control the rate because it's too dry there.
Mm-hmm.
See, and in the winter, it's even, that's what tripped me out, but it's the driest in the winter because there's
kind
no.
Of, you go to Denver, I know it's.
Yes, it's like 20% humidity.
Yeah, and very low humidity.
20 to 40 is like the range. So in the summertime, it's in the 40s and you have like a month of rain and then you have like, 10 inches a year. But the climate was so weird. It dried you out just being in it. I never drank more water without being thirsty. I mean, you had to continuously hydrate because you could feel your body, the skin change.
Yeah, your lips would get chapped and stuff like that.
Yeah, so that's the part that was so tricky is that, and it would be awesome to go there and be able to like get a lab to just be able to kind of take a look. And not that science answers a lot of the questions we want to know, but it helps us understand better the complexity, the question we should ask.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to say is that the areas that we were in, we're still largely talking about subsistence farming. So in that situation, like you would prepare for bad harvests. Like if you have a surplus one year, well, you have to figure out how to store it so that it keeps in case the next year or the following year is not so good and you still need to feed yourself. So that's where and they have like, also technology, electricity, fridges. It's just not making its way there en masse. Like you don't have a department store that you can go to and get the newest like Maytag or whatever.
No, and the electricity is so iffy even in the big cities. I remember when I was there and I've seen things that reference the brownouts, that you have kind of on a rolling basis. So
like California. Our electricity goes out as often as theirs does now. I'm serious.
When I was reading about the processing methodology for the hashish there, they talked, and you had shared this with me too, Imran, when I asked you about a grading system for hashish in the area, about this, and I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, awal gul, the first flower?
Yeah, awal gul. And awal means first. It's an Arabic word. And then gul means flower. I think it's Persian. I could be wrong about that. But that literally refers to the first sift that comes off when they, you've probably seen, but for those who aren't familiar, the way they're doing this sifting is they're stretching out these cloths over these, what are essentially things that people would normally recline on, like just imagine.
It's like a bed frame kind of situation,
And then they will have knocked all the bud off into small, like broken up bits. They'll stack it in a pile. And they'll just quickly sift it over this outstretched sheet and it goes into another pile. It's not done yet. It has to go through several passes.
Like the first pass. It's like the first wash, if you will.
Exactly. It's considered like the highest quality for them. And so it gets, that's going to cost more. That might get held by them for their own personal stashes. That's like the primo for them.
Did anybody say that they had that for you? Did you taste that?
Oh yeah. Like we had something of everything. We had awal gul, we had the goat skin, we had something that someone called gold. I wasn't quite sure. We had the static sifted stuff. We had stuff that I'm not sure exactly what it was, but it was also good. It actually, and this is maybe if I was going back, I would love to kind of label them because I didn't always know which one I was trying. I was just like, these are all fantastic.
When you smoke it, and you got to remember too, right? And this is something that's interesting as well, is that Western culture influenced the newer generations in Pakistan to the extent that what they desire to consume is California varieties grown indoor. And so when we show up, we have 1.5 pounds of indoor, 6 quarter pounds of different, and killer indoor. I mean, I was sitting there laughing. I said, I can't believe that I'm looking at really nice indoor in Pakistan. It wasn't what I expected. And then I said to my partner, I said, hey, did you guys got the hash? And he goes, yeah, we brought some. And I said, great. He goes, I think we got half a key for you. And I said, wait a second, you got 500 grams of killer dry sift? And they go, yeah, of all different farms from all, like the boys went and selected it with the farmers in the regions. And so, you know, you're looking at the herb and you're realizing that the Western herb is influencing the younger Pakistanis.
Yeah.
And which means that the next step will be the desire for the extracts. And they'll be able to say, okay, product grown in my country, extracted and put into this product, looks like something on Instagram, because that's where everybody's getting their cannabis culture from. Like if you're young now, where do we get it? We got it from living in it and from whatever cultural beacons we looked at.
But
and then,
to a large degree historic, because us hippies were going to Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, and experiencing firsthand what was actually happening there back
yes,
then.
yes.
Yeah.
And you
then
brought
there was
that back, and you brought that back.
Yeah.
And so it's through the, you know, the travels of you and your husband and all the people of that era that were in those regions.
Yeah.
That's where we got our knowledge and stuff from. But now you have the internet, which allows people to be able to see it in a very different manner, and in some ways good because it lets so much information out, but in some ways not good because it filters kind of what do we call like what's pushed.
Yeah.
And but the point is that the desire for concentrates will in younger people now, just like Imran had said earlier, he's right. Hash was for old people, but it became something for young people. And that's what I was saying earlier. I meet people all the time that when they're breeders and they're hash makers and smokers, but we're smoking weed together and they're like, you know, I've only been smoking herb for a year. And I'm like, what? I don't understand. You've been making hash for 10 years. And he goes, I never smoked the pot.
He never smoked herb before he came to North Carolina.
I began as a pen smoker, never smoked a joint. And then I went into making my own product. And then I started breeding for better product, but I still never smoked a joint. And now 10 years into my game, I'm smoking flower and I'm learning to experience and appreciate it in its form. So you have this change of where people are being introduced to products and what cultural influences are shaping their views. And so it's pretty interesting because you're starting to see these regions adapt and take some of the pieces, and hopefully, you know, you can create a situation where the good parts of both cultures kind of, you know, touch and connect into both worlds.
Yeah.
And that was really the desire of the group that brought us out, was this recreation of the Silk Route, this idea that people figured out how to do good business back and forth, and it shaped the world. And when the Silk Route was shut down is when you started having the oceanic exploration to really go and take.
Right.
And how do we create these relationships between these regions that shaped our entire world in terms of cannabis and benefit in a way that lets them benefit in return?
Well, and that's why I think having this conversation with you about, you know, this positive experience that you had in Pakistan, your obvious respect for the traditional work that they're doing there is so important. And also having people like Iraz or Baba, what is it, 978 on Instagram, people that are locally, you know, taking the risk to show their work and to speak about it. To expand the understanding of what the options are, and a little bit to really pay respect to the ancestors, to those traditions that we've all benefited from so much.
Isn't it kind of funny? I think that's kind of funny in a way, because a lot of times, like, social media does get demonized. They're like, oh, you know, you guys spend too much time on your phones. Like, you know, what about connecting with people? And that there's merit to that. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, social media has allowed someone in Afghanistan or someone in northern Pakistan to show that which you would never have a chance of seeing unless you went there yourself, which, let's face it, like a lot of people are not.
I have so much appreciation for them for the risks that they've taken. And also, I mean, like Baba's descriptions of the various hashish from the different regions, and he talks about the flavor, the aroma, he talks about the type of high it is on the body.
Yeah.
It's just wonderful.
They're eloquent. Arazin
Oh,
and I connected years ago, and we got involved on this project where they did the gathering, and I said, hey, I'll take some of the stock, and what I'll do is I'll open source it to the public at all the cannabis events, so that what we get to do is we get to take some of these incredible genes and share them into the community. And because it wasn't being charged, it changes the entire context of the cannabis relationship, right? And we spread it out. And you go forward 2 years, and that whole region got wiped out through war in Afghanistan. And so, like, to me, the point of a lot of this is that once you move stock from one place to another, you definitely change it. It has to change because the environment changes. But at least what you're doing is creating these living banks of history through plant material. And it keeps pieces of it alive. It allows you to be able to say, hey, there's things in Northern California that if we had been able to get out of the country and have held somewhere, then we might still have them. And it's the same with what they do. And you have to have like a global mind on this. And I think it's important to be able to understand how to really work with it.
And at the same time, preserve the local land races so that they continue to exist. I think just the balance that in some places we haven't done so well.
No, well, they don't have an ability to we're Western, right? So we're always contextually about getting paid. So our getting paid is our driving force, right? Like, we're going to get paid. And so it changes the way we operate in all contexts. But a lot of these regions, unfortunately, those that get paid are at the very top. And similar to our world, but there we have a far different overall level of access. And so the problem is that you see these incredible products coming out of India, out of my friend Ryan went and did a rub-in with Zamaya, the collective, Random. And it was just an incredible trip. I was just fascinated by what they got to do. And it's those products that, we would really love to see here and access. But, how do you get it legally from one place to another? And how do you actually get the farmer to benefit? And so the thing with all the guys online, Landrace Genetics, Iran, Baba, every one of those people that are involved in it, every village they work at benefits from their work. There's a trickle down. It's community. It's like the old dope grower way, where everybody in your food chain got a bill. So this way everybody got paid. So this way everybody was stable and you didn't have any weird shit going on with your team. When you financially subsist a little bit, you kick a little bit extra flow around, it allows you longevity. And that's the problem with, most of our global agricultural situation with small operators, is they don't have anybody really pays them. So you have to develop relationships with the people in the country, in the region, who are regionally minded.
Well, I think we saw that with chocolate. There's two big distributors in the world that were artificially repressing the prices of chocolate. So we had agricultural slaves. And I think we've seen through the mismanagement of legalization of cannabis in California, something that very similarly has occurred by obliging us to use distributors and dispensaries. They're getting paid more than the farmer. And they've pretty much, Frenchie used to say, it's like all of the NorCal farmers are like the golden goose that lays these golden eggs. And that if you're not careful, he told Newsom at the one event that you guys had at Mattole up there, that the geese had wings and they'd fly away, and that the eggs that would be left behind would be broken. And I think we've seen that. It's astounding how much damage this kind of unthoughtfulness has done to NorCal cannabis economics.
I've often
everywhere, actually. Look at New York. I mean, New York's the most robust market in America, right? And
I mean, it's the same stupid people that are doing this kind of slash and burn, and then going on and, because I've seen it when we did the workshop in New York. there were so many NorCal people there that had started new farms. It was just like, haven't you guys caused enough destruction yet?
So I've often wondered if like a concept of fair trade would work with cannabis. And then the question becomes, well, if you did something like that and conceivably like the end product costs a little bit more, well, that for a lot of consumers is like a big deciding factor. So you need to be able to communicate a story to them to help them understand that, yes, this costs a little bit more, but understand that all the way along the way, going back to say the farmers in these particular villages in these traditional regions, everyone is being like appropriately compensated. Nobody is being exploited. I don't know. Maybe I'm a bit of a dreamer. Maybe I'm an idealist, but I don't think it's impossible.
No,
Well,
it's you can't do it.
Again.
You just can't. But the thing is that it's chocolate's a different product than herb. And
No,
and
we
so
got rid of the middlemen, Kevin. If we could get rid of those middlemen,
but we're
we
not
could
gonna
do
but we're not gonna get rid of them though. Like I know how it would be best, but I just know how it's not gonna happen. You're not going to get rid of middlemen. What you do it is you got to do it on the genetics basis. You have to be able to do it on the gene basis because it's the movement of the genetics that allow you then to be able to put a product in that's a multiplier. So if I sell weed, I just sell weed and it's consumed. But if I sell a genetic, right, I sell some form of genome. I've have a plant that we've tagged and said, this does this thing. Here's the material from us. We want to bring this into a system. If you take that and you mark it and then you put it on a blockchain, then what you have is an ability to be able to employ the Nagoya protocol, right? So the Nagoya protocol was I researched it because somebody hit me with it. Somebody said that my helping this group in another country, I wasn't following the Nagoya protocol. And I'm like, well, it's hard to follow. So I researched it so I could understand what I was really not doing. And I was doing it to a degree. And that's what me and the guy eventually worked out, that I was trying to do the best I could with what I could do. But there's no way to create these official forms of payment when you don't have contracts between countries. And so the issue is it's federally illegal no matter what you do, because it's doing inter-country business without any kind of licensing, which you can't do. So yeah. I said, well, why don't we take the essence of the Nagoya protocol and just apply it? And what it really means is that the people who have the native goods, the natural resources, when that leaves their hands, what they do is they begin a chain of custody and a derivative of value, so that as this product gets moved into the stream, so say we talk about a seed, it goes to me. I have to pay a license on the product to use. If I then sell that product, there's a trickle back from all the different transactions that occur on a diminishing basis by virtue of how far away you are from the initial transaction. So most licensing deals work like that. So it's not revolutionary. It's just that what it's trying to do is create an everlasting ongoing benefit from anything put into the system. So if we put something in and it becomes a success, then for the next 10 years, any success containing that genetic form, a portion of it returns back to the farmers that put it into the system.
I mean, that'd be lovely, but already right now we have such kind of thievery in breeding. And I mean, look at those studies, that one study that was done. They pulled all the data from 5 different states of 5 years of testing. And they showed that, and it was like 94,000 test results or something. There were 12 different terpenes represented, and basically the final analysis of the test was that you guys are all calling the breeding is just variations on a theme. You guys are stealing from each other and renaming it, and that you don't have a respect for kind of the licensing or the ownership of the genetics.
No, but as you start to go forward, remember, as we start to go forward, what you're going to have is you're going to have better protections in place by virtue of the fact that you'll have, you hate to say it, but you'll have better lawyers. And at the end of the day, any industry you're in, you have to have infringement, right? Like if you come up with something, and I came up with a design for a logo for our logo for Old Wonderland. And I drove by a store one time and saw that. And it was funny too, but I laughed. I said, hey, They stole my whole font and the design, and it was in the window. And I didn't sue them, and I could have. But I laughed because I knew him, and I was like, wow, that was the first time I had came up with something that was a visual image that somebody saw and then straight bootlegged and made money on. And so it made me realize right away that what you have to do is you just have to know that you're going to get fucked. And you just have to see you're going to get fucked. But if you can mark, remember, it's about value and it's about placement. If you're doing this stuff in the shadows of the night, there's nobody there to point fingers. But if you're doing these transactions in the open air, everybody can see it. Blockchain lets it be real. Who touched the fucking money? Where did the genes go? If you have a track and a trace, people are far less sneaky. So there's no way that they can't be clearly said, hey, here was a transaction, and then here is a failure in a transaction, and you're the one that accessed it. So what we have is an ability digitally to create at least a proof. It's a ledger. And at the end of the day, there's always sneaky people.
But I just feel like like you said, it's good. There's a lot of stuff that's happening in the dark.
There is, but why can't we begin better process? Say you have someone like Imran that says, hey, I have an ability to access some material from another country. I think it would add really, really good value to what I'm producing now. I would be able to change the profile. I'd be able to introduce people into a broader palette. I would expand my reach. And I would have some really killer marketing because the story is just fantastic. And used correctly, that's a fucking product launch. And what you do now is you behave responsibly and you pay the person that you got the material from and you create this contract. So it isn't that every single person on earth is going to benefit, because that never happens in life. But the idea that at least somebody in a village will, to me, that's where you begin. Like, I never think I'm going to change much. I just know, though, that if you can impact one small area and you can allow there to be some success that resonates, because people are so lazy, they'll copy that shit and you'll see it everywhere. It's the fact that you just got to succeed somewhere, and then people will just copy it, just like that logo I created. That font and those words, I realized, whoa, you just have to do that and someone will want to take it. And all we got to do is create the relationships and the chain. And you have to have the people in the area be the broker. Like, it can't be us that is in control.
Kevin, I wonder if you remember the number of times when we were in Pakistan where we saw like a logo that we both know for some company or some product that was just being wholesale, just like used right there, like whether it was like Starbucks, like someone had opened like it clearly wasn't a Starbucks, but there's
who's going to enforce it?
Yeah.
But their impact isn't, they're definitely not taking Starbucks's money.
Nah, yeah.
You know, but but people will do what they do, and I give you credit. Like, I'm okay with it. It's just that I'm not okay with being in a position of power in doing it. So I'm sympathetic to you if you have less and you knock some shit off, so because you could use the money. But if you're in a position of power and you knocking people out because of it, I don't think that that's reasonable. And so to me, it's having these proofs. And it would be like each village would have a representative that they would have to bring forward themselves, someone they trusted. And they would be the emissary. And then you would create the digital chain. And the thing is that a lot of the villages, you know, you would say that they're like undereducated, but it's odd because it's hard to be undereducated when you speak 8 languages. And so, you know, some of the stuff I saw them doing was mind bending. I'm serious. Like, it was like, the intellect development of the region is phenomenal.
Well,
and so once you
that perspective, right?
I mean, yeah, we have a different view of, you know, like of education, literacy, and when you're in populations that are having over 90% literate, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's a bit like that. I'm going to paraphrase that quote, but if you judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, like it's just not reasonable. There was a question that someone had asked. I just wanted to go back to it, which they had asked, what's the average cure time before the hashishins in Pakistan start processing for hash? And this kind of ties into something that I was just saying earlier. So interestingly, since the Taliban have taken over Afghanistan, they have begun like a pretty heavy-handed crackdown on traditional cannabis cultivation and hash making. What this has had an impact on is it has created a drought of hash. There's just not as much hash being produced in Afghanistan as there once was. So we can think of Afghanistan as like the largest hash producer, and probably Pakistan's a close second.
No, Morocco is a bigger producer than either one of them now. 10
Yeah,
years
yeah.
Fair enough.
But,
Morocco's biggest.
yeah.
But basically what this is, the effect that this has had is it has driven up the average price of hash. And so the farmers in northern Pakistan are finding that the sooner that they can get their product to market, then the sooner they can see a return on their harvest. And this ties into what we were talking about with Mujma, because whereas before they might wait the entire winter season or most of the winter season before to start processing, the ability for Static Tech to clean up what is kind of like lower quality material has meant that some of them have begun processing like fairly immediately, like relatively quickly. Like once the material has reasonably dried, they'll start working with it, which has changed basically how soon they have hash. Whereas, you know, you might be seeing last year's harvest ready in April. Now you might be seeing it in November, December. It's ready to go. So I think
4 months. I think 4 months was like the traditional sit time.
Yeah.
Well,
and now it's been expedited.
That biology of, you know, part of that, which Frenchie always appreciated, was that you were allowing these terpenes to kind of work their magic. Some of the terpenes being naturally corrosive, and also some of the like lighter monoterpenes just dissipating, and then having this kind of back flavor with the heavier sesquiterpenes. So it's kind of interesting, what's this going to do to the, you know, kind of psychoactive effect of what you're smoking, because it's going to be much, you know, the terpene profile is going to be somewhat different.
Yeah.
You know what's a key thing to say too is the average price is increased. That means it's going from like 150 to 200 US a kilo. So like that's the price of good. Like that, like when I was asking him, how much does this cost at the bazaar? And they were like, oh, this would be around 150. And so now we see that price increase because of the compression in Afghanistan. So I think it must be creeping into the 175, 200 zone. But $200 for a kilo of premium dry sift. And then the gradient all the way down to the blocky shit you use in like tea production.
Yeah. Did you guys see, and I asked you about this before, Imran, I have a historical like sales chart from Lebanon, and they've got 8 levels of hash quality. You know, and they've got names for them too. The English translation names are really great. Like the best quality is called best quality. The second quality is called correct flowers. The third quality is just flowers. And then commercial flowers, delicious Pepsi. And then it's like the 6th quality is called second quality. And then 7th is third quality. And the fourth quality is actually 8th quality in terms of the, you know, actual, how it's being used. And this chart actually like relates it to assumptions on sieving size in the cloth that they're using. This is Lebanon, you know, so they were using the more traditional sieves, and they were passing it through the sieves multiple times to create these dimensions of quality. And so I was just thinking, in these marketplaces in some of these other producing countries, they must have ways of referring to this because the traditions are so old. So that
totally. Saeed, you know what's crazy is that you're in the middle of nowhere, and somebody's got a cell phone, and they're on IG checking, and you're laughing, and you're just like the connectivity. So the cell phone becomes this portal. Yeah. And so we're hanging out with Saeed. Saeed whips out his iPhone, and he's like, check it out. And so I have Hami with me, and Hami's translating, and Saeed is showing me all the different types of hash at the hash bazaar that he was just at, where he was selling all his hash. So he was showing how he produces it and then the quality levels of it. I just didn't get the names of the ranks, but he was talking about lower quality, bulk quality. and you could see the color change and the density formation. And then he went, and then there was beautiful video he shot of other really killer stuff. And it was just really similar to what was brought to us. So like that gold, I remember one of, I don't know if it's the same one, but when you opened up the package and you broke it out in the sun, it literally shined like gold flakes in a river.
Yeah.
It refracted light, really interesting. Like I'm just not used to seeing that particular color pop off of a ripped open chunk of hash. And so any of those upper ranges we would say would be in that, 150 to 2. So you would just say, hey, premium hash is at 200. Here's the gradient. And then what we'll do is we'll reach out and we'll find out what the names are, and I'll get that back to you. Because I know they have to have words for it, because he showed me all the levels.
I have from Lebanon, because it's and I don't know when this one was done. I think it could be very dated, but I just love that idea. When I'm always thinking about, because I'm a student of aroma, so I've studied chocolate, I've studied coffee and tea, that whenever you start to have international commerce on a product, you have to have a way of describing these dimensions of quality, so that if I've got a business, let's say I have a tea house in California, and my tea house is of course selling hashish because I want people to smoke in my tea house. When I, contact your friend over there in Pakistan, I want to be able to understand those variations in the dimension of quality, so that I can make sure that I'm ordering the correct thing. So that kind of expectation, like we've said around language, if I order hashish at this top quality, I don't want you to send me rosin. I'm going to be disappointed, I had a big discussion with somebody in Canada the other day, and they were like, well, this is my culture. I'm going to call it what I want. And I was like, but that's like with dairy. Within dairy, we have cheese, we have milk, we have ice cream. If I contact you as somebody who wants to buy, and I say, please send me a bunch of ice cream, and you send me milk, I'm going to be very disappointed, because I don't want to have to churn that stuff by myself. So yeah.
No, it's common language, but a lot of it is, you remember, it's just emotional. That be pure. This is like you identify with it. And the main point is that you get people emotionally defending their position, because at least what it does is you're connected to it. And over time, you usually, as you age, you become more reasonable.
Yeah.
And so what you're developing, you're developing, but you're the foundation. But I know, but we're really like we're not going to see the evolution. I know that I'm a link from the past into the present, but the future will be different, and I won't be able to see the end result of what occurs in what we've done.
No, but
we've tried to make cannabis a little bit different in the world, right? It's okay. I'm okay with that portion. So I just know that as long as there's momentum forward, the fact that people argue about their hash means that there was without question a hash culture forming. Because I'm sure that people argued hand rubbed or sifted. You know what I mean? Like, I just know that the each one of the guys that whipped out hash all were like, this is the stuff. And you could tell they were proud of their shit, just like we are.
That's almost like a hashish versus rosin conversation, because again, it's those terpenes are vastly different.
They are. It's just, but it's a family. It's a family to me. And the ability to get, because that as soon as you touch something, at some point you'll expand your repertoire. You'll open up your ideas. I started out as I was running Rockwool forever. I was a hydroponic cultivator. I experienced better herb through biological indoor, and I said, whoa, it's better weed. And so that was the change. And then same thing with outdoor. You start to learn how to work with a natural system, and you just end up having for you something that feels better, and you think that the product is really good. And it's this development for each individual.
Is very subjective, but I want all of the products to exist. I mean, I want it to be similar to the alcohol and wine industry. We never hear, I don't know, I've never heard a person who drinks beer say you shouldn't drink wine or you shouldn't consume vodka. I want all of those things to be available. But I want people to have the education to understand what their options are. So I just want more information out there. And
it's happening.
I was going to say something that just because we were talking about definitions here, right? And it just so happens that I have a website which literally defines like a bunch of terms for extracts, which at the end of the day is not an easy thing to do. Like you kind of have to make a decision and stand by it, but also know that like it might be wrong in the future, or like someone else could tell you something that like changes how you approach it. And I'll tell you, one of the hardest ones to define was hash, because you could write an encyclopedia on hash. Like you could. It's so deep and so storied that trying to define it simply in 2 sentences is not an easy thing to do. But you do, at the end of the day, have to put your foot down somewhere and say, this is what I think it is. But definitions by their nature, like we find them useful as humans, but there's also a philosophical element to it where if you really start picking at it, you realize you can't define anything at all, because it's all kind of like, wait, what do we actually mean when we say the word art? Like, do you know what I mean? Like it gets tricky.
You have to limit to define. That's the problem.
Yeah.
I think the whole thing is we want to use language to understand each other. And so based on that, we need some definitions. And I think Frenchie approached the definition when it came to cannabis concentrates by the process used to create them, because the specific process creates a specific end product. And I like that kind of logic and specificity, because like I said, if I order ice cream from you, I don't want you sending me milk. So I think we need some degree of agreement basically with the North Americans. We've kind of polluted the situation once again, because we didn't have this problem in Europe, or in parts of, in traveling in India, they knew the difference between charas and hashish.
Yeah. Well, I think some of it, like, for example, like charas, that's a word that is not like, it's not an English word, right? I've had people, like, to me, charas, well, it's a Hindi and Urdu word. And so if you go to Pakistan, you say you're looking for charas, they'll give you dry sift.
Yeah.
But to me, charas is more often than not, it's the hand rub stuff that comes from northern India. So those already are like slightly different products. But who's more right? Like you're talking about neighbors, they both speak the same language. They're both referring to slightly different things. Like that becomes challenging to decide, like one over the other. I know people, for example, that call all extracts, and I even mean like solvent-based extracts, hash. And I'm like, all right,
I do too. And
that's a little crazy to me, but it's funny you say this about the terms and chocolate and whatnot, but I have a dream of one day that it could possibly be the case where I could be that person that imports hash from northern Pakistan into coffee shops in Amsterdam. Like I'd love to be that dude that, I mean, this with chocolatiers, right? They speak to small farmers in like Trinidad and Costa Rica and the different places where chocolate is grown. And they say, send me a sample of your product. And if I like it, I will import like many kilos of it and we'll get it distributed. I mean, it could happen. It's not impossible, right?
It would be amazing. Well, and that's why you need to start working on the lexicon for your grading system now, because it's not going to be easy. Because like the guy told me in Canada, they have their own culture and they're going to call it what they want.
Yeah.
But you always grow though. Like cannabis, the consumption of resin in any form over time seems to kind of calm people down. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what I just learned over the course of my life, that the exposure to the product is the key. People have to be exposed to it, and over time it allows you to evolve. It allows your mind and yourself to find, and it doesn't mean you're going to come to my conclusion. That doesn't mean that my conclusion's right, but you'll evolve in your own direction, and you end up getting a better, more accepting situation. And people start to say, okay, I'm emotionally connected to this too much. I just need to learn to accept that this is what this is. It's the war. It'll happen.
So much about being right or being wrong. It's about being understood, because I think,
I know, but people are they're taking it emotionally. It's the same thing with small farmers and big entities. They're stealing from you because they're taking your place. They're not over in your house stealing any from you. They're not stealing your jeans. They're not stealing your farmland. They're stealing your storefront space. They're stealing your ability to make money. And because you can't make money in the thing that you've done your whole life, they've stole your identity. because now you're going to have to change who you are and do different things in order to function and survive. And so that is what drives it. And I just think that as you start to get more and more people exposed to the product, you'll start to see more and more of those segments unfold, and you will develop a beautiful traditional hash culture throughout the United States. And you'll develop a rosin culture through the US, and then we'll have a pre-roll culture. Every segment will open up. And to me, the main point is to constantly put the information out so that people can just, it's not that I'm going to give you some worldly view, but at least it's a position that you can either agree or argue against, but it forces you to go deeper. If you want to fight it, you have to do some research. And if you agree with it, it helps you understand that maybe your route is correct for you. And to me, that's what these podcasts do. They create conversation that lets people either disagree or agree. And from there, it starts to drive the discourse. And over time, you start to really be able to say, hey, we can agree on these things. But this is an infancy industry for us. When I talk to the Europeans, they always laugh at me. And they're like, you Americans, you know so little, but at least you admit it, Kev. And so I don't get brutalized because I admit that I don't understand a lifetime of hash culture. And I've been smoking hash since I was probably 13 years old, and I'm 57. But that doesn't mean anything, because it just means that I was exposed to the American version of it, about culturally consuming it. It's not about the product. It's about the way they integrate it into their world. It's so much more profound than just the differentiation of the word. It's about the culture of the consumption, and how we're really in our infancy as a cannabis culture. We're the youngest cannabis culture, really. You know what I mean? Maybe Australia, New Zealand too, you know what I mean? But like some of these colony places, we were the last ones to really get into herb heavily. And then we're the ones that consume it at a rate that's incredible. So to me, we're like little kids learning about how to use the drug, but we're little kids with technology. So we're smashing the world with what we're creating and doing. We just don't really understand how to look at the product in a way that lets everyone benefit from it, which is what I saw in Asia. I saw the product woven through a society, and I said, holy shit, it's feeding the animals. It's being used for all your health issues. It's being used for spirituality. It's being used as biomass to throw back on top of the field through the goat. So like,
I think that's why
juvenile.
It's important for people to learn how to make their own, because we do have so many people in, the US and Canada who are good growers that have had that experience. And so it's just the next step for people to learn how to harvest the resin, so to speak, and be inspired by, what these traditional cultures have been doing in Pakistan and Afghanistan, Northern India forever. And really learn from their knowledge and their experience and their kind of, like you said, this integration of the plant in so many aspects of their life.
Most of these kids, though, Kim, I'm being honest, most of these kids that I meet, and I mean a lot of them, state to state to state, without question, anybody that's touching anything to do with traditional was really first inspired by Frenchie, because he was the first one to really throw it out. And what he did, though, was he also created this incredibly, everlasting knowledge base. So it transcends your life, and it's resonating around. And then he had apprentices who became masters. So you got Duchess and Belle and Lena that all are acclaimed at what they do, and they all represent the craft really well. And, so he leaves this legacy of existing, masters of hash making. And it rippled, because it was, I think, personally, it was the development of not just the information he put out, but the fact that he was able to take people who wanted to learn and lift them up and then release them into the world as Hashashins, and they're killing it. They're just killing it. And so I think it really lit this fire for, all the people that are, globally, I can't speak, but I know that everybody I meet in America, because I ask them, I'm like, what was I'm fascinated by motive. Yeah. And so I'm always trying to understand what drives you. And I was exposed to this online through Frenchie. And then I went to a workshop, or I, went through the whole video series. And then we talked about the progression, and then they're showing you, now I've evolved to the level that I breed my own material to get better extract in this form.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's beautiful.
Yeah. And I think it was so meaningful for Frenchie, because he used to say, we were clueless youths, and he would go and ask these people, can I come and, learn your process? Can I come and work beside you? Because he was so cute and charming. In most cases, they said yes, and it was so important for him to be able to pass on what was given to him. And what the beauty of that has been, sometimes he's had people from producing countries where, because of the US war on drugs and, negative impact on their family, that they've called him. He had one guy, he called me up one day, he was driving to Humboldt. He's like, you won't believe what just happened. Some guy from Lebanon just called me to get input on his hash making process, because his father or somebody was put in jail. And so he didn't have, he was missing a few key points. And I was able to basically give the information.
You know what that reminds me of? That kind of reminds me of the idea that, like, during the Dark Ages, the Islamic world kind of was given, like, they took custody of a lot of the ancient Greek and ancient Roman knowledge.
Yeah.
And basically then kind of it went back to Europe after they kind of sorted, and this is an oversimplification of things, but it's interesting that knowledge can kind of, you can essentially lose it if you're not careful in areas. But it's fortunate that we have people like Frenchie who were able to take it, preserve it, and deliver it back in a way that people, like generations after, can still benefit from him.
Well, and then also, like, people like you and Bill and the whole generation that he trained, that you're able to take it and move it forward in your very unique way. I always think of this Kahlil Gibran poem where it talks about, it's called On Children, and it says, your children are not your children. They are life longing for itself. You are just the arrow. Make sure that you shoot you are just the bow.
You're the bow.
Sure that you shoot the arrow very straight and true. And I think he did a great job of that, because you guys.
What did he say? He said that as much as the bow appreciates a straight arrow, the arrow appreciates a good bow.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he was a profound poet. But it's true. It's you get to see it in real time, and it's fascinating. Imran, he has an idea to do some educational video stuff that he revealed to me that I think is going to really make a lot of these things easier for the public to understand and for individuals. And you start to be able to create the base information, because most of our conversations are really with people like me, which I call like weed freaks. So we have a different conversation. But it's trying to get the mainstream public to really be able to understand, hey, these are all the different things that are possible.
Yeah.
And you'll find for you what's optimal.
Yeah.
But you got to understand the bigger picture. And it's for us, like, we're all involved in education to some degree.
Yeah.
And it's trying to be able to, give information without putting too much of yourself in it.
Yeah.
Because, you become a filter. You become a filter. Mm-hmm.
Kind of like making a cake. You want to have your flour and your butter and your eggs and maybe milk. And then there's variations on a theme, and you can just, like, the sky is the limit. And it's pretty much the same with, I think, cannabis concentrates, that you have to figure out a way to very nicely remove the trichome head from the plant. And then there's a bunch of amazing things that you can do with the trichome head and what's inside it. And we don't even know all the things that we're going to be able to do with it, because science is still really in the infancy of the exploration of that.
Yeah.
And it goes far beyond traditional hashish or rosin culture or, any of the other, solvent concentrates. Yeah. You guys have a beautiful future.
It was about 5 years ago, going back, was when I took the Frenchie's workshop in Manhattan. And
it snowed, and we were in the basement where they had the water leak.
but
and the guy nearly electrocuted himself fixing it.
But like
the price of fame, you get to work in the basement.
But like, I look for, like, I take a lot of inspiration from Frenchie, not just in the fact that okay, like, yes, he's talking about hash and he's very passionate about hash, but actually his way of teaching, like his way of communicating information, I feel like had he been interested in coffee or any other product, like he would have brought that strength of like communicating effectively at a level where people can understand and really just like engrossing himself like fully into that thing. And I can really appreciate that.
Passion is
I also,
infectious.
yeah, very inspiring in that way. Yeah.
Well, we've reached the 1.5 hour mark that I asked you guys. We're a little bit over, actually. So
Yeah.
I think we should wrap up and let everybody get on with their Sunday. But I want to thank you so much for joining me and for the lively conversation. Kevin, as always, you're a delight, and you too, Imran. But let's do it again sometime soon. And yeah, I think, Kevin, are you going to go to the Grow Up Conference in Toronto in May?
I got invited. I'm just not sure time-wise if I can fit it in.
I hope you can, because Belle and I are trying to make it happen as well. And so
oh no, it'd be great. And I love Randy, man. He's solid.
Oh, he's so
and I really enjoy the experience and the team. And it's just, you know, you trying to fit it all in. And then I got kids, right? And so I'm old enough now where, like, with my first son, man, I was grinding all the time. And you get older and you start to realize that I'm grateful that I got to have him long enough through time so that we were able to build the pieces. But man, if I could go back in time and spend more time with my boy when he was younger, that's what I would want. And I have a young screamer in the other room who's 4. And so for me to be gone too much, I just, you know, it's funny, but you miss being home with your family. And that's such an odd thing for me to say.
What was that toy that you brought him? Remember you were like,
I brought him the marcour. I brought him the 2 bronze marcour that Mushy grabbed for me. So Mushy, one of our partners, buys me these 2 bronze marcours. And the marcour is this regal mountain goat with these huge spiraling horns. It's just a fascinating, stunning animal. It's not bigger than the ibex, but it's taller than the ibex. But its horns are incredible, and it's just this bearded, ferocious goat. And so I brought home 2 marcour, a bigger one and a smaller one, so me and my son could play. And of course, as a kid, he's like, I want the big marcour. So I have to be the little marcour and he's the big marcour. And we have him fight on the bed and stuff. And oh, it's great. Yeah, no, man. Mushy was a character. He was such a good dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, if it can come together, that would be amazing.
Yeah, no doubt. No, I would love to. And I talked to Randy. I just got to try to figure out, can I make it work in May? If I light the farm up, it just starts to make it difficult because then you're away from the once you farm, like farming to me it's a 7-day-a-week job till it's done. It really you always have to be present, right? And I had the farm shut off for a couple of years now because the market was kind of jammed up.
Yeah.
And so it allowed me more free time during some of those warmer parts of the year. And I don't know if this year I'll be able to do it, but if I can, I'll let you know and we'll go. And I'll also make sure that I find out the grading names for you.
Great. Yeah.
And I'll get you a list. Yeah, I'll get you a list of them. So all I got to do is I'll just hit up the boys and ask, and they'll be able to get the info for me.
Yeah, you know, because the Facebook Lost Art group, they have a thing on there called the guides. And so I've been making like a library. I just have been gathering all this historical information.
Oh, awesome.
I mean, just about all kinds of different things. And it's, especially as I've been working on Frenchie's book, it's been so, it's just, yeah, it's never ending, interesting thing.
The guides you've been putting up there have been really impressive though. Like I do a lot of hunting for information. There's not too many people that are doing what you're doing with that. Like that's
thorough
stuff.
Kimberly's thorough.
Friends used to call me the American computer. And I don't
know doubt. I get to spend time with you doing education. And it was a pleasure because you absolutely come prepared.
Okay, thank you guys. I appreciate it so much. And I really look forward to doing it again soon.
Awesome. Happy New Year, everybody. Thanks for having me on.
Take care.
Ciao.